stoplight to stoplight, 400 wheel horsepower, 3800, you're going to be the fastest car on the road in average traffic and anything in between. Ask me how I know. Welcome back, guys. Another road to horsepower. We're going 400 wheel horsepower with our beloved OG 3800 V6. If you didn't catch, follow up on our road to 300 horsepower, because that's going to go over a lot of the basics that lay the foundation for making 400 horsepower, as we're going to talk about today. So we're not going to double down and touch on a lot of those initial things, so reflect back there. A lot of that goes over how to make 300 horsepower in an M90. Starting with the M90, we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to take that 300 to 350 horsepower setup and really swing for the fences, if you would, on making 400 wheel horsepower on the M90, because it is no easy task by any means for anybody who's building a 3800. So some of the big things that you're going to need right off the bat, whether it's supercharged or turbocharged, is you're going to need an 80-pound injector in E85. We don't want to try and do this on pump gas, in my opinion. We're basically at a point where KR and detonation is going to be the limiting factor for really leaning on these setups, and we don't want that to be in our way while we're trying to get to that 400 wheel horsepower mark, and it's gonna be there. So everything we can do to reduce KR, E85 for an example, is gonna be a good tool to have in our back pocket. I can't even explain it enough. When we are leaning on the M90 hard enough to make 400 wheel, how important ethanol is. We're gonna be able to run more timing, we're gonna be able to get more aggressive with the air-fuel ratio. Overall, just gonna have a much more happy and optimized setup with the ethanol. You're gonna need an 80-pound injector. You know, I'll probably put my foot in my mouth a little bit, because I said 60-pound injectors are basically enough for anything you wanna do on the M90, and it's because they are. But not everybody is making 400 wheel on an M90, so the 60-pound injector is done at about 375, 380 wheel horsepower on E85. So 80-pound injector, E85. Beyond that, you're gonna need the ZZ350 at this point, or the AEM 320. Factory fuel canister, drop that in. It's gonna be sensitive below a quarter tank on scavenging issues, especially when we're moving the amount of fuel we are through that canister to make 400 wheel horsepower. So make sure that you're running this thing above a half a tank at all times, that you're gonna be beating on it. Fuel system's really important. You get away with a lot in the beginning, but now we're at a point where there's no room for error in the fuel system. So make sure that you got that ironed out first. Obviously, as the road to 300 horsepower talks about, fuel pump rewire, new fuel filter, alt bolt booster, power wire upgrade, all that stuff. Beyond that, on the M90, we really got to pay attention to all the details underneath it. One big thing that you're going to need, I believe, to achieve your goal is high compression bottom end of some sort, whether it be a JE piston, ZZP rod, or the tried and true L36. Because the M90 is so limited in what it can flow and its capabilities, we're going to need to basically make sure that all other areas of the engine are making good power and ready to make the power that we need to. So that's going to be at least at minimum an L36 or L26. I would choose the L36 because it's got a little stronger rod. That's the 9.5 to 1 compression is going to be crucial for making 400 wheel. Or you could go with our H-beam ZZP rod and a JE forged piston. There's a couple good compression options there, but compression is going to be something that you want to think about when you're trying to achieve 400 wheel with the M90. Turbo, not so much. We'll talk about that in a hot sec here. So fuel system, compression, and then the valve train has to be 10 out of 10. You're gonna need a baller valve spring. The 150s or the 136 pound valve springs are gonna do the job. No corners cut. You're gonna need lightweight retainers. You're gonna need the 165 rockers. You're gonna need the XPZ cam. And you're gonna need an extremely ported cylinder head. Unfortunately, we're not making or offering a ported version of a L67 cylinder head at this time, but there's a lot of good guys out there who are capable of porting a cylinder head for you, and you're gonna need them to take it within its absolute limits of airflow capabilities. You're gonna need somebody to really work the guts clean out of those things to flow enough air to make 400 wheel on an iron head, or trying to attain some of our older ZZP aluminum heads. With the XPZ cam in an aluminum head combo, you'll be able to make 400 wheel. That improved casting, untouched, flows enough for 400. That's actually what Zoom's car has on it right now, and it makes about 425 wheel horsepower. With the XPZ cam, you're gonna really get a clean power band and all the drivability still. I think you can probably still daily drive a 400 horsepower M90 car if you put it together right and remote tune it with me. HP tuners is gonna be a must in this mod list on the road to 400 horsepower. No 1.0 tune, no mail order tune is gonna get you there. You're gonna need to be able to diag that setup and make sure it's 100% before you hit the dyno. Beyond that, just make sure you're intercooled, which we covered in the road to 300. You're gonna need our full 2.5 intercooler, and you're gonna need a Gen 5 for sure. On the topic of Gen 5, we're gonna be in a range where we're gonna have to run a pulley that's pretty small, smaller than most would want to run on the street or in your daily driver setup. You know, we're getting down into that 2.7, possibly 2.8, 2.6, 2.7 range, and overdriven if needed. Nice thing about overdriving, when I say that, I mean our overdriven balancer. The overdriven balancer takes a little need off of running a small pulley, so we don't have to run into belt wrap issues, which is where I was going with this. Is for running a small pulley, you're gonna need the belt wrap. You're gonna need the 8-rib conversion. You're not gonna hold a 2.7 pulley without an 8-rib conversion, and you're gonna need our belt wrap as well. The 8-rib and the belt wrap combo work really good down to about a 2.6. So, you know, you're gonna probably want to put your 400 wheel horsepower M90 setup together on a 3.0 or 2.8, and then when it's dyno time, that's when you put the small party pulley on, and that's going to be at the discretion of your tuner, obviously. You're going to need to have a little bit of a arsenal of pulleys, if you would. I'd probably put it together on a 3.0 and drop down accordingly from there based on how what your tuner's telling you and how the data looks. We're going to strive for, you know, an 11.5 AFR on E85 and 20 degrees of timing to get us to that 400 wheel mark. The boost doesn't need to be super high, but since we got this thing ported and the cam's flowing like crazy, you're gonna need a small pulley to keep that M90 in its efficiency range. So about 11.5, 12.5, up to 14 pounds of boost, depending on where your KR is. You know, we got E85, as we already mentioned, so you're really gonna need to take everything in the 300 horsepower mod road to horsepower video and optimize it with killer valve train, compression, and cooling, as in E85. So other than that, I'll just wrap up on the M90 part of things with you're gonna need trans options, and you're gonna need everything we have available and then some. You know, all of our hard parts on the website, the input shaft, hardened fourth, chromoly pump shaft. You're gonna need the Sonex third piston, everything you can do to keep this transmission together. If you wanna go through and get all of our hard parts and have a reputable builder do it, you know, a standard rebuild with our hard parts available are gonna be what you need. Right down to the shift kit, in the trans pan, everything you can do to help improve that 65E's life at 400 wheel horsepower. I really don't think 400 wheel horsepower is out of the 4T65E's comfort zone. It's really not. The transmission in my Regal's been put together with all of our off-the-shelf parts in a standard styled rebuild, and it's been making 400 wheel horsepower for 30,000 miles. It's got track passes and tail the dragon trips and weekend fun and everything in between, getting me to work. And it's proven to work really well, and I think it's all how you care for it, keeping it cool, treating it with a little bit of respect. And the 65E is really good transmission, and that transfers right over into the turbo stuff. You're gonna need all the same parts, all the hard parts, and you know, a fresh rebuild along with new fluid and just keeping the sucker cool. That's the really big thing. One big thing that I want to touch on too is you're going to need a torque converter and our heavy duty flex plate. That was actually the first part I broke on my car after adding the turbo, was the factory flex plate, which may not be the case for everybody, but I see it more times than not. Those factory flex plates break, so make sure you pick up a ZZP heavy duty flex plate, and then add that to your catalog of transmission mods. And you know, keep in mind that you are on the limits of transmission parts over 400 wheel, in my opinion, and you know, treat it as such, drive it as such. There's a difference between pushing the car, and there's a difference between just plain beating on the car. And so, you know, a lot of times if you're being dumb and you break a transmission hard part, input shaft chain, you know, you'll learn real quick not to do that again next time. But moving into the turbo side of things, man, this is where turbos shine on a 3800. 400 wheel horsepower is their bread butter. It is what they love to do. If you're setting out to make 400 wheel on a 3800, turbo's where it's at. So we got our entry-level Z3 turbo kit. That's gonna do it. On the bare minimum side of things, 1.9 rockers, 90-pound valve springs, the fuel system mods that I've explained, 80s, you know, E85. That Z3 kit's gonna make 420 wheel horsepower and about 18 pounds of boost. Super cool that you can just bolt on some valve springs and rockers and a turbo, and next thing you know, you got double the factory horsepower at the tire. You know, my Regal back in the day, it made 410 wheel horsepower on 18 pounds boost with the stock L67 in the car and 1.9 rockers. That is a really cool spot to be at with a 3800, in my opinion. Z3 kit on 18 pounds with 1.9 rockers is one of the best driving, performing vehicles you could probably bolt together as far as what this platform's capable of, in my opinion. And then, you know, just looking deeper into that 400 wheel mark, you want to add an ST2 or ST4 cam on that Z3 kit. That's going to yield some really good gains. And then beyond that, you know, we got our Statima kit. That's gonna make 400 wheel horsepower basically right off the rip with 1.9 rockers and valve springs, like I said, and E85. It's an overall nicer kit. It's a little more complete. It's got, you know, better, bigger hardware, bigger exhaust, and turbo. You know, everything's bigger and better about it. At the 400 wheel horsepower mark, I don't think you need to jump for the Statima, but it's really nice kit if you got the budget for it. Go with the Statima. It's one of the best turbo kits out there for the 3800, and Matt, he spent the last 20 years perfecting that kit, and it's really a cool piece. That's what's really cool about these turbo cars. They drive like stock. They get stock gas mileage. They idle like stock. The 1.9 rocker turbo combo is so underrated, in my opinion. It's absolutely outperforms any M90 car you could ever put together, and you don't even have to open the engine up. You just slip some rockers and valve springs in there. The turbo is just that much more efficient and effective that it just happily makes 400 wheel on, you know, pretty conservative boost, relatively speaking. And then, you know, if we're looking a little deeper into the 400 wheel mark, do the ST5 cam and that Statima kit, and you're going to be having a hard time not making 500 wheel, which is I think where we'll go after this. Might have a special guest for you, see about that. And Zoom's got some stuff up his sleeve. You know, the current M90 world record holder is Zoomer's 97 GTP on our old dyno across the street, probably 10 years ago now. I think it made 465 wheel horsepower with the M90, and it's been rocking around the 425 wheel horsepower range since, just R&D and parts and enjoying the car. But he's found some new love and passion for that M90 project, and we got some cool stuff coming for that. if we want to make 500 wheel horsepower on M90 is not something that materializes overnight. So just to let you know, we're still working on some M90 stuff in the background, and that 500 wheel horsepower mark I think is lurking over Zoomer's head a little bit. So we'll be excited to bring you some updates on that in the future. But yeah, I think if you want to take away anything from this video, 400 wheel horsepower, it's turbo time. It's turbo time. And the Z3 or the Statima kit are going to do that for you with the combination of E85. So other than that, don't forget to check out Road to 300. Get you some maintenance-oriented entry level into the modding process there. I kind of just touched on, you know, stepping from that video to the 400 wheel mark today on, you know, the valve train upgrades that you're going to need and the compression. And or is it just worth your while to maybe get the turbo kit? I'm trying to push the turbo kit more and more these days. I see a lot of guys really enjoying their turbo car, and especially throughout the remote tuning process, they're running crazy fast times. You know, for reference, back in the day, this car on the M90 setup, it was running 14.2s, and we didn't change anything other than put the Z3 kit on it, and it ran 12.2s. So we dropped 2 seconds at the same boost level, just switching over to the turbo on this car. So they work really well, and that's why that 400 wheel horsepower is so much more reachable. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in the Road to 400 horsepower. We got our Moose and Grimace, and you know, both see at ZZP. I tune all the 3800s here and love tech supporting you guys. So if you need anything, feel free to shoot me an email, bo.c@zzperformance.com. Hopefully it's for your remote tune, because I would love to help you guys dial in your setup. Maybe 400 horsepower is something you're working on. We can certainly get you there. As always, take care. We'll see you next time. For 400? 400? Say 400 so many times and then you can't say it. This road gets a little sketchy down here. This is where we used to do some, well, we still do some suspension shakedowns. If you got a clunk, this road will find it. Which it appears Grimace does not have any clunks.
Wanna race that piece of shit?
Tim giving me heck.